Hello, welcome to Big W Barbecue. My name is Nate. Today we're going to be using the reverse sear to cook up a Parmesan Crusted New York strip. Thanks a lot for joining me here today. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, a special welcome to you. If you're not familiar with the reverse sear, all it is just another method for cooking up a steak. To give you a little background on this method, some say that the traditional way to cooking a steak is by putting an uncooked steak on a very hot grill, get a nice sear on the outside, and then go ahead and cook the rest of the steak up to the desired temperature. All we're going to be doing is flipping that around. So instead of doing the sear first, we're going to do that last. What's so great about this method is that you get a nice consistent cook all the way through the entire steak. When using the traditional cooking method, the hard part is getting that nice consistent temperature all the way through the entire steak. What would normally happen is the very center would be the right temperature, but as you get closer to the surface, it would be a higher temp. And the second method here we're going to be doing today is going to be adding a Parmesan crust to this. What I like about adding the Parmesan crust to the end is it kind of just enhances the steak just a little bit more. It makes it kind of give it a little more of a fancy feeling to it. So if you're cooking steaks up for a special occasion, this may be a good recipe for you. So the cut of meat I'm going to be working with today is a New York strip. I've got just under 1 pound here. If you're going to be using the reverse sear as your cooking method, I would definitely recommend getting a thicker cut. Anywhere from 1 inch, 1.5 inches, if not 2 inches. If you get a steak that's a little too thin, it makes the reverse sear just a little bit tough to accomplish. So let's go ahead and prepare the steak. So before you add your preferred seasoning, go ahead and leave this steak out on the counter for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Go ahead and let that temperature get closer up to room temp. Then from there, you can go ahead and add your seasoning. Now go ahead and add a fair amount on here. Don't get too carried away, but this is what's going to enhance that final crusting sear. Like how I normally prepare my steaks, I like to use kosher salt and coarse ground black pepper. Then we're going to go ahead and flip this around and repeat the same process. From there, then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this out to our grill. Now you can use either a charcoal grill or a propane grill. The key here is this: you're going to want dual zone cooking here, right? So you're going to want the heat on one side of the grill and your steak is going to sit on the opposite. Now the idea here is that we're going to want to increase or kind of cook this steak low and slow. So if you can get a temperature of around 250, 300 degrees at first there, that's just going to help it just kind of gradually increase in temperature. So now depending on how thick the steak is, as well as the temperature of your grill, it's going to vary on how long this is going to take to cook. Now one of the downfalls of using the reverse sear is that it takes a little bit longer than what it would be for the traditional method. However, like most things, a little more time just makes things taste just a little bit better. Now, so one difference here on what I'm going to be doing here today is since I'm going to be using that Parmesan crusted topping, what that's going to do is I'm going to have to put that into the oven on broil, so it's going to continue to cook a little bit more. So if you're cooking this just for the reverse sear alone, the temperature on when you're going to pull this off is going to be a little bit different. Since I'm going to be cooking this a little bit more after I pull it off the grill, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up to be about 20-25 degrees less than what my desired temperature is going to be. If you're not planning on using the Parmesan crust today, what you could do is you go ahead and bring that up to be about 15 degrees less than what your desired temperature is going to be. So in this case, I prefer my steak to be medium rare, leaning towards rare. So I want my final temperature to be about 130 degrees. So that means I'm going to go ahead and pull this off at about 105, 110. The reason why we're pulling this off early is because we're going to go ahead and sear it at the end. So you got some cooking time there, as well as, like I mentioned, I'm going to be putting this in the broiler for a little bit after as well. So I've got to count for both those cooking times. I'm by far no master at this cooking method, but the best way to get better at it is just go ahead and keep practicing. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and take this steak out to the grill. So once your grill is heated up some, you're going to go ahead and put the steak out on the grill. You're going to go ahead and place it on the rack the furthest away that you can get from the heat source as possible. After about every 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to come out here and rotate the steak a little bit. Now again, our idea here is to have a nice consistent cook throughout the whole steak, and so we want to make sure that each part of the steak has equal time towards the heat. So now while our steak is outside cooking, let's go ahead and prepare our Parmesan crust. So the amount of ingredients I'm putting together here today is probably going to be enough for 1 steak, maybe 2 depending on the size of it. I'm going to go ahead and add this recipe down below in the description for your reference, and you can go ahead and multiply that by however many steaks that you have. So the first ingredient I'm going to add is here. I've got about a 1/4 cup of softened butter. I've got about 1/8 cup of panko breadcrumbs, 1/8 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, and I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, coarse ground black pepper, as well as minced garlic. And then our last ingredient is going to be a 1/2 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. Once you've got all that into a bowl, you're going to go ahead and kind of mix that around. Alrighty, so that's about the consistency that we're looking for here. Now that we got our crust created, we're gonna go ahead and head back out to the grill. Now once you reach the temperature that you're seeking here for the first step, in my case it was 110 degrees, I'm gonna go ahead, pull this off the grill and go ahead and tin it with some tin foil. Now we're gonna go let this hang out here for about 10 minutes or so, and while this is happening, we're gonna go ahead and crank up the grill, get some more charcoal loaded up. What we want is a really hot grill to go ahead and sear this thing off. This is also an excellent time to go ahead and turn on your oven to the broil setting. So now that steak is rested for a little bit, we're gonna go ahead and toss this back out on the grill. Like I mentioned, we want a really hot fire now. We're only gonna be adding the steak here for a couple minutes on each side just to get a nice sear and nice crust. All right, we're back inside now. The steak is all done cooking out on the grill. So now the next step here is we're gonna go ahead and add the crust and we're gonna put it in the broiler for a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and grab that Parmesan crust that you created a little bit ago, and we're gonna go ahead and add it on top of this steak. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. We're just gonna go ahead and form it to the top of the steak. All right, now this thing is ready for the broiler. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the rack in my oven and get it up as close to the heating element as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this to a cast iron pan and put it in the oven. It's only gonna be in there for a couple minutes, just enough to kind of melt the butter, as well as kind of crisp things up a little bit. All right, we're all done now. This thing smells and looks fantastic. Can't wait to try it. So this was in the oven for about a minute and a half. And like I mentioned, all we're trying to do is just kind of get a nice crust on this steak. So let's stop talking before this thing gets cold and let's dig right in. So as you can see here, we've got a nice consistent cook all the way through, and that is why I love the reverse sear so much. That Parmesan crust on top of that New York strip, man, that is some good flavor right there. This steak was cooked to the perfect doneness on what my preference is. It is a nice medium rare, leaning towards rare, and man, that's some good stuff right there, my friends. The crust has got a nice cheesy flavor, as well as it's got a nice crunch to it from the breadcrumbs. If there's one thing I'd do different with this crust is I'd be a little bit less heavy-handed on the salt. It's just a little bit strong, but it's not terrible. Overall though, I'm really happy with how this steak turned out. Like I mentioned, this kind of has a little bit of a fancier feel to it with the Parmesan crust on top. So if you're looking to celebrate a special occasion, or you just want to kind of change things up a little bit, this is going to be a very good option for you. Hey guys, thanks a lot for hanging out with me here today. I hope you've enjoyed this recipe. Please let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on the reverse sear, as well as if you've ever tried a Parmesan crusted top before. I hope that you guys have a terrific rest of your day. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one.